It's Sunday, and that means it's time for another episode of Enemy of the State's Dank Pod-Stash, episode 84 specifically, with Rachel Nielson. Before we jump in there, first and foremost, thank you so much to my Dank Pod-Stash super supporters on Patreon. Maxwell, Dave, and Dennis, you and all the other patrons keep the show going, and I appreciate it so much. I also got to say, the Dank Pod-Stash is officially sponsored by Project Sparta. It's time to get hashtag Boogaloo ready and in fighting shape. Greg Papanicholas is going to get you there with personalized meal plans, training, group support, and tons of amazing fitness and motivational resources and knowledge, including the Project Sparta Facebook group. Get on over to projectspartacoaching.com and learn more about Greg's work and get started on your path to health. Don't be that person that only sits and talks about change, whether it's your health or even the Boogaloo. Get up and start learning, drilling, and training. One of the most important parts of prepping, no matter what for, is your physical health. Get to projectspartacoaching.com now and get after it. That link is, of course, in the description. We also have a special offer for listeners of our show from friend, author, and content creator Shane Radliff of Liberty Under Attack Publications. You can take 10% off your order at libertyunderattack.com by using coupon code DANK10. They got all kinds of books focusing on all kinds of awesome shit, including Hashtag Agora, Second Rome book on strategy, Sedition, Subversion, and Sabotage, and Shane's very own Vanu, a strategy for self-liberation. And they have a full service suite for assistance with new authors, from Kindle to editing, proofreading, all kinds of good shit. Get over there, check them out. That's Liberty Under Attack Publications. Share your story, find your freedom. Special shout out to Voluntary Apothecary. Voluntary Apothecary was kind enough to send me a sample care package full of awesome beard care products, including beard oil, mustache wax, combs, and more. You can check out their amazing products at TashTamer.com and VoluntaryApothecary.com. Be sure to check the episode description for those links and a link to the Voluntary Apothecary raffle. Get your free beard care goodies. The Dank Pod-Stash is teaming up with Road to Anarchy for a monthly newsletter and more. Road to Anarchy is an online magazine connecting groups of voluntary individuals who are looking to increase their freedom from the state. Becoming more self-reliant and developing a better focus on becoming a productive individual is the only mission. The only division is against the state. No matter your flavor of anarchy, finding your road to anarchy is the first step to progress. The time is now to put our individual differences aside, join up, and create change. You can go to roadtoanarchy.com to sign up for the monthly zine, or to patreon.com/thedankpodstash and get signed up with any tier of support. Check out the Road to Anarchy Facebook page and groups to connect with other individuals on the road to anarchy. Where is your road taking you? Shout out to Anarchy Radio. Join Anarcho DJ Phoenix for Friday night super jams. All music, all night, starting at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. Saturday morning interviews starting at 10:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, and news and opinion starting Mondays at 5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can find Anarchy Radio live on the Float app, and if you're a Dank Pod-Stash patron, you can watch my Saturday morning Anarchy Radio interview on the Dank Pod-Stash Patreon page. And now, let's get into this awesome episode. You know, it's always an awesome episode, and this one's no exception. And this one is with, like I said, the wonderful Rachel Nielson. Fucking enjoy.
Enemy of the state.
An enemy of the state.
Enemy of the state.
Dank Pod-Stash.
You're listening to Enemy of the State's Dank Pod-Stash. Check out thedankpodstash.com to find every episode of the Dank Pod-Stash, links to support the show via our BitBacker and Patreon, Dank Pod-Stash merchandise, and much more. If you'd like to advertise on the Dank Pod-Stash, email us at dankpodstash@gmail.com. We're back for another episode of Enemy of the State's Dank Pod-Stash with today's guest, Rachel Nielson. Haven't had you on the show yet, and I believe I said I don't know why I hadn't had you on the show yet when I messaged you about it, but I'm glad to have you here. How's it going?
It's going real well. This is life over here in Colorado, a little different than the rest of the country looks right now, but pretty happy to be here.
Nice. Well, what's different looking about Colorado?
This whole coronavirus thing, everybody still seems real locked down in the city. Things are closed, and we're a little bit ahead of the schedule on this side. Businesses are back open, and we didn't really get hit like everybody else.
Okay. Are they doing like restaurants and whatnot? Are they, mandating social distancing inside those kind of businesses that are open, or is it still like takeout and delivery only and stuff?
Yeah, they are. They have limited seating right now. A maximum of 10 people, I think, is what I heard most recently.
That's interesting. Yeah. Jay Inslee is the governor over here in Washington, and he has like a 4-phase plan. And I think we're still at phase 1 or whatever, but it just seems completely arbitrary. Like bars and restaurants will only be able to have their restaurants open, no bars once we hit the next phase, shit like that. And it's just, I don't know. It's weird. And I don't see much of what's going on in the city because I live pretty far out. But when I do go in town, I hadn't seen, many differences most of the time. And then the last time a couple weeks ago, there were, lines in front of Home Depot and stuff like that, and people wearing masks. But it seems to be more people than usual out and about walking dogs and riding bikes and shit like that. Are you seeing people just out and about doing regular shit despite all the new normal stuff?
Yeah, this is a high recreation area out here. We have a lot of mountains and valleys. We attract a lot of mountain bikers and climbers and, just general mountaineering, and everybody's back out and doing their thing.
Nice.
I haven't seen anybody on the trails in masks. People in the stores are still wearing masks. We get some side eye sometimes for walking in without.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you saw people on the trails with masks. I think that's hilarious. People out doing outdoor recreation.
Nah.
Fucking A. Well, before we jump back into that stuff, because you have a unique perspective as far as people, at least that have been on my show, having to do with the COVID stuff since you're in healthcare. But before we do that, why don't you tell us about your path to anarchy, how you became an anarchist?
Yeah, when I was younger, I was a good voting liberal. I thought I needed the country's conscience. That was the conscience party.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually Ron Paul led me to libertarianism. And then I dated an anarchist who asked me which of those libertarian principles I was willing to force on my neighbors and when I was going to make the jump. So started researching, met a few people in the online community on Facebook, and I'm about 5 years into anarchy now, but man, it's pretty great.
Yeah, hell yeah, it is. That seems to be the way it goes for quite a few people, not just Ron Paul, but meeting more people in the online spaces, which is good, but it'd be nice to meet more people face to face, I think. At least that's how I feel after being in the online spaces for so long and seeing a lot of the nonsense that goes on.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think we probably don't really have a huge anarchist enclave over here, but we've got a couple dozen members strong.
Nice.
And everybody's real active, Mm-hmm. I definitely see a lot more people in the online community getting out in their communities and really building things up, especially like with community gardens. Mm-hmm. and a lot of the networking right now, because we've got people who've got too much stuff and crops and meat farmers and they're finding ways to get it to the people that want it, and that's great.
Yeah. That's exactly what we need too. And yeah, I have noticed that as well. It seems like more people are venturing away from the interwebs and talking to people in real life and doing that kind of stuff, which is good. I think that's a good byproduct of, the whole COVID, whatever, lockdown, government mandate nonsense.
Yeah, me too. I think we're all kind of surprised by how quickly shit started happening, It's like one day everything was normal and then all of a sudden everything's locked down. You can't get toilet paper, you can't get groceries. It's just absolutely astounding how quickly things can change. So this is a really great period to try and get organized and get everything rolling in the way that you want to see it, build that community that you want to see.
It definitely is, and it seems like a lot of people who definitely aren't anarchists, and not even necessarily libertarians, at least by how they identify, are kind of realizing that they have to go through some more of the back channels to make things work while the government's cracking down so hard. And I like seeing that. That's a great opportunity to plant some seeds of freedom in their mind. Because I think about that. I'm like, how are you justifying evading taxes or lying about whatever to keep your business open and still going and voting for whichever Republican or Democratic candidate? So I'm glad they're seeing that, but got to break through that, whatever it is, Stockholm syndrome, cognitive dissonance, whatever it may be.
Yeah, for sure. If we can just get them to understand that, nobody can represent your interests like you can.
Mm-hmm.
These people are not interested in representing your interests. They're not interested in what they can get for you. They're interested in what you can do for them. And all these taxpayer funded programs that they're promising away. I don't think people realize that they're the ones, them and their children and their grandchildren are the ones paying for all of these things.
Yeah.
But if they did, maybe they'd feel differently.
Yeah, they don't realize that.
So re-education.
Yes, that's definitely the start. But yeah, they don't realize they're paying for it, and they don't realize the implications of the Fed printing money out of nowhere. The money printer go burr meme. It's going to be nasty, I think.
Yeah, it sure does.
I don't know. That's something I've talked about with a lot of people too, is that timeline. Like, are we going to hit hyperinflation? Is the economy actually going to collapse? Is the dollar going to collapse? That kind of stuff. I think looking at past recessions and depressions and whatnot, that bubble that's been patched so many times after it pops just keeps getting inflated. And I think it's pretty slow to deflate lately. I don't think there's many pops. I think we're on kind of a slow road to these economic hardships. But what do you think about that? You think we're heading fast or slow?
God, man, I just don't know, because things do happen so fast. I really see a culmination of so many things coming together right now. We've got the bottlenecks potentially, plus some government intervention when it comes to the food supply. I worry about, for me personally, I worry about medicine, access to medicine. Big Pharma and big medicine has gotten so many people dependent on so many things: blood pressure medications, diabetes medications, just an astounding amount of overprescription, especially like psychotropic drugs like depressants. What happens if they shut off the supply to that?
Mm-hmm.
There was a letter that came out in Colorado probably about 5 weeks ago that said that they weren't going to allow any more than 3-day prescriptions for controlled substances. That's a really big deal for people on things like Adderall for ADHD. That's actually a scheduled substance. And
Right.
I just don't, I'm constantly wondering what, with all of these things, the snowball effect of all these things adding up, when are we going to see just like an absolutely staggering amount of change? It happens so fast. It happens so fast. The lines at the food banks are miles long now.
Right.
What happens when that food starts running slim? People are going to get desperate, and we really could see just another big change overnight, I think.
Yeah, I think the desperation and the loss of comfort are a big motivator in people becoming violent, looting, rioting, that kind of stuff. And if you add on top of that valueless dollar, valueless national currency, that's really going to spark things off. But I think your worries about medicine and whatnot being available during times like this are definitely founded in, really, really solid reality. And not a lot of people think about that, you know. Do you have a stock up of your diabetes medicine or whatever that you can keep viable for a long time if the system shuts down, whether it's transport or manufacture, whatever it is? There's some good books that pay attention to that in the event of a collapse. One I just got finished with is 1 Second After, and that's, you know, despite whatever violence from people and looting and the grid going down and stuff, there's going to be so many casualties from, you know, lack of medical care, whether it's medicine, whatever, because like you said, people are dependent on so many things. And, you know, a lot of them are imports as well. And even without a collapse, a lot of the stuff I'm assuming we get from China. That's what I've read, but I think you'd have more insight into that as far as medicines and things like that. I don't know how many are manufactured in the U.S., but what if we go into a conflict with China or whatever, with all this blame being shifted on them, and there's, you know, no more trade, anything like that. Things are going to get really nasty, you know, no matter what path we go down, it seems like. I don't see a path where things are going to go back to, first of all, standard normal, but anything better, at least for a long time.
Yeah, I don't either. I think standard normal is over. I think I don't see any way that we can get back to standard normal. So then, you know, that presents the challenge of moving ahead. Now, I'm a big advocate for the agorist road of obtaining your own medications. If you know what you need and it's consistently the same thing all the time, have that backup source. But most of that stuff does come from China or from India. And if shipping becomes more of an issue, and it already is, but if it becomes more of an issue, we don't produce a lot of the things in the United States that we used to, or that people are using.
Right.
And not all of that stuff, you know, there are going to be a lot of sad stories, and I don't know that all of them can be prevented. I think we just do what we can to try and mitigate risk in the meantime and become more self-reliant. Some of those things, I don't know the answer how you become more self-reliant. Some of those meds, maybe people can wean themselves off, but not all of them. You know, we're a dependent nation at this point, and we did this, we allowed it, you know. Now how do we fix it?
Mm-hmm. Now, do you have any idea how we became such a dependent nation? Because I look back to where we didn't have, you know, modern medicine, you know, only maybe a couple hundred years ago, if that long, you know, 100 years ago. And, you know, of course there were asylums and whatnot where they stuck people who probably didn't need to be there, things like that. I wonder really, really deeply why we've become so dependent on so many things. I know probably a lot of it is diet, but the psychotropic drugs like you were talking about remind me of what I guess Joe Rogan says about you know, gun violence in the U.S. and it's that we don't have a gun problem, we have a mental health problem. And there's so many factors, but being close to it in your industry, I'm wondering what you think about that.
You know, I see advertisements for medications for quick fixes all the time. They're all over the internet. They're all over the television. You know, the community creates diagnoses to sell drugs too. You know, I remember when I was a kid, there was oppositional defiant disorder, and I was put on Prozac. For that at like 17 or something like that. I was on Prozac for a number of years, and then I switched to a bunch of other SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors.
Right.
A lot of those drugs, you can't just stop taking them. Once you're on them, you've got to wean off, and then there are all kinds of nasty side effects from weaning off too. You know, but as far as like everybody becoming dependent on drugs, some of the things that I see are like blood pressure limits being changed so that you can sell more blood pressure medications. You know, what is considered high blood pressure, what's considered borderline blood pressure, and when do you start taking it? You know, there are people that live all the time with a blood pressure in the 160s or something. It's not healthy. But now we've got people with blood pressure in the 130s being put on medications. They become dependent on these things, you know. There's so many different drugs that people become dependent on that maybe aren't necessary, or could be prevented a different way, maybe with diet or exercise or some kind of natural thing. I mean, all these drugs used to be roots. You know, we
Right.
used to eat the roots and the berries and make the tinctures, and we need to go back to some of that.
Sure. Yeah, it seems, I'm sure, you know, a ton of it, a high percentage of it is profit driven by the industry. So, and that seems to be the case with everything. You follow the money.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I mean, they control the world too. I mean, we're seeing now how the medical mafia and the big farm mafia controls the world, and it's all about sales and profit.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is. And it's not just, well, it's kind of one in the same, corporations and governments lately. And for a long time, I'm sure. Because, you know, as we both help run that Road to Anarchy group, that awesome group, despite the shitstorm it's been. We see people railing on it from both sides, you know, defending capitalism and then admonishing capitalism, whatever. But people don't seem to realize when they're having these philosophical arguments that corporations, for the most part in the U.S. now, are one and the same with government through lobbying and trying to get their protection from government, and government's trying to get their payday and whatnot. And it's not even actual free market capitalism anyway, so who fucking cares? But so let's back up a little bit, because I wanted to ask you about what your observations were from the first rumblings of the whole coronavirus thing up to now. So if you could think back to where you started seeing stuff, maybe even just affecting your work since you're in healthcare, and what you thought as things progressed up to now. Because I know a lot of people at first, of course, were freaked out and are less so now due to numbers and lying and whatnot.
Yeah, gosh, that one got big real quick. You know, I think the first that I heard about it was some random thing released by Wuhan lab or something, and then it was the guy ate the bat, and as you know, when I think back to the start of it all, and it's really hard to do because, man, so much has happened in the meantime.
Mm-hmm.
It has just been a huge storm. I never thought that it was likely worse than influenza. Um, in the very beginning, most of my coworkers thought the same thing. And I'm still not entirely convinced that it is worse. But, you know, my perspective is different because I live in the mountains of Colorado. We've got a population that's small here, about 100,000 people. We saw a total of 35 cases. You know, it's not the same here as it is in the larger urban centers. Gosh, it was pretty quick that we started getting emails from the health department and the government directing how we were going to deal with the problem. We didn't even have a problem yet, and we were already getting directives for how, you know, what we were going to do. Some of it was in regards to the gloving and the masking and all those things, but some of it was in terms of diagnosis and reimbursement for diagnoses. I watched the statistics change so much, and where we went for those statistics and for those numbers changed a couple of times too. We went from getting our numbers from the CDC to a Johns Hopkins funded number aggregator, and then the numbers just got out of control really fast. And how they were confirming these cases was not the same across the board, and we're still kind of there at that point.
Sure. So as far as not being as bad as, you know, the seasonal flu or influenza, whatever you liken it to, what in how are you quantifying that as far as deaths or symptoms or severity? What do you mean as far as not as bad as the flu?
Death statistics, I would say. presentation is pretty similar. Every now and again during flu season, we have a particularly virulent strain, and you'll end up with like people on ventilators and stuff like that. Most people who suffer the minor form of the flu probably suffer worse than the people who are walking around with us today who have suffered the minor version of the COVID. I'm not sure. I know that, comorbidities or pre-existing conditions, serious health concerns certainly make you higher risk for having a more severe form.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true of the influenza as well.
So what do you think about the death certificate stuff that everybody's talking about? They put, it seems like they're saying no matter what, they're putting COVID on the death certificate if they're dying during this time, pre-existing conditions included. I would think that if you have a pre-existing condition, that doesn't mean that COVID couldn't kill you, because it exacerbates your system. It overloads your system with that. Am I mistaken on that? Is that normal, or you think they're just super inflating the numbers in any way they can? And if so, why would they be doing that?
Yeah, I think in a lot of cases, those numbers are probably inflated. I don't know if we'll ever actually get real numbers. It's incentivized. It's financially incentivized to make those diagnoses. It's financially incentivized to put them on ventilators, which, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in New York that people are talking about right now, as far as boosting those numbers up by putting people on ventilators too quickly. That there's just been a huge incentive to diagnose COVID. As far as the deaths, I don't know if anyone's actually benefiting from putting COVID on the death certificate beyond the people who are pushing all of these things that we've got going on right now. But the diagnoses at the hospital level, which is the level that I'm most familiar with, there's absolutely financial incentive to diagnose COVID.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. And I think, I want to say a month or two ago, did you have to go help at a testing facility or something like that? I can't remember. It was in one of the group chats or something. What was up with that?
I was told that I should prepare to have to fulfill that role, that I would be moved from my peri-op department that I work at to work at a National Guard testing facility at the fairgrounds. But we never had enough cases for any of that to happen. The testing site didn't even get put up at the fairgrounds.
Oh.
So it was on the horizon, but it didn't happen.
It's probably a good thing. I kind of think we could still see those, coming in the future if they want to follow China's plan. If the U.S. government wants to follow China's plan of proving that you're not infected to go anywhere in public and whatnot. And I don't know, it could even come down to having your papers with you like they have over there. I don't know if you saw that video of them testing the robot law enforcement or COVID enforcement patrol, where it stops a citizen and they have to hold up your papers to the camera and whatnot before it lets you continue. I would have said a while ago, I don't think we'll get as dystopian as China very quickly, but then this shit happened, and they're already putting drones out, that have infrared or whatever to see if you're fevered. They're testing those in different places, California, one of them. So
Yeah.
Who fucking knows? Have you heard anything about that through the medical community or just through the normal channels?
Well, just through our channels and through major news channels. I have not heard anything about that medically. Medically, they still talk about a second wave. In my state, we've got a 3-part plan. And if we don't accomplish all of our goals at stage 1, 2, or 3, then we get moved back a stage. Right now, we're at stage 2, where we've got the light open. But they certainly... They tell us all the time, that if the numbers go up, then we could move back to stage 1, which was that total lockdown stage. We don't I don't know. I watch these things and I'm kind of left with this sense of awe that it's actually happening and that people are tolerating it.
Mhm.
Just because I don't think that I'm going to see a whole lot of that over here in this small community. Our cops didn't even enforce lockdown.
Yeah.
It's just, this is not the environment for that. Everybody over here is a well-armed redneck, and they don't like being told what to do.
Yeah. God bless those rednecks. I live amongst them as well. I guess
Yeah, I
I'm
love
probably
them. Yeah,
I'm probably counted among them at
those
this
are my
point.
people.
Yeah, hell yeah. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
hopefully we don't see that widespread, but who fucking knows? It is a world apart from more
Yeah,
rural
like
to city.
all these. It is. And, I see these advertisements for like these COVID trackers. There's a big push. If you're unemployed, come become a COVID tracker. What are those
Jeez.
people doing?
Brown
Are they going to
shirts.
have some kind of, are they going to have some kind of enforcement capability? Are you going to go to jail if you're out wandering with a fever or if you're standing too close to people? What are they doing with all this information?
I would imagine that you would, because fuck, look at what they're doing to people paddleboarding in the ocean or, wherever the fuck they are. Even if they're away from people, they're getting arrested and going to jail for not social distancing. So they're being forced into compliance and, more exposure of whatever they're worried about in the first place. So that sends the signal to me that it's really not about the safety.
Oh, it's definitely not about safety, man. I'm really worried about people's immune systems in 6 months when they've been stuck in their house and they're wearing masks going out in public. People don't understand immune systems. We need exposure to dirt, to each other's germs. That's how we develop immunity. That's how we stay strong.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think, so you said that colleagues are talking about a second wave. That's what I'm predicting. I'm predicting we go into fall, winter, and there's a second wave. If we have a pretty much open country again, if all the governor tyrants' phases have been met, their qualifications for opening up have been met again, I think we have another wave, whether or not it's real, and another lockdown comes. And I'm wondering, too, if another wave is not only dependent on people coming back together after not being exposed to each other and their germs, but if also this virus is following a similar track to the flu season, letting off in the warmer months and picking up in the colder months.
Yeah, it certainly could happen that way. We might have an annual coronavirus season as well now too. I don't know. It's just kind of all up in the air right now. It's all right now. I just see right now as a time to batten down the hatches and prepare for anything. I surely was not prepared for this. I would not have foreseen this coming. I know they've been talking about releasing superbugs and all that stuff for a long time and advocating for getting ready for such things. But I didn't necessarily see this happening. As far as the second wave, it could surely happen. We could end up with a seasonal coronavirus. And then what are we going to do about that? Are we going to let them lock us down for 6 months out of the year so that we don't spread this? That's insanity,
Sure. Well, can you imagine too this crippling depression that would occur, and probably suicides and fuck all, who knows, if we get locked down in winter, because it's on top of that seasonal affective disorder, the depression that winter brings so many people going back into quarantine. So now they're like, fuck, I'm getting locked up again, and just however you feel being isolated from everyone else. I think that's a even bigger scare.
We're already seeing it. Over here in my town, we saw more emergency room visits due to suicidal ideations, suicide attempts, or domestic violence than we have from the coronavirus. And it's still ramping up, I think during the winter months, you're right, it would be exponentially worse.
It'd be fucking sad. It'd be terrible. Yeah, I want to know. Of course, everybody wants to know, but I think about a lot, if this is something having to do with population control, mass experiment to see how people handle a more authoritarian control, because it just seems like everything is just baseless. When the claims of for our safety are baseless, whereas the enforcements, I think they're seeing how they react to those, and it's discouraging. It's discouraging to see how a lot of people react to them, because I know businesses are opening up here and there, defying their local government's orders and whatnot, and some of it's successful. Sometimes people going out and standing guard there are successful in deterring police from doing anything. Other times the police come back when they're not there and ticket or arrest the owner, or there's like what happened in Texas where they brought out a fucking MRAP and Meal Team 6 came out and arrested all the supposed Boog boys who were standing there to guard, and they just gave up instantly. It's like, what the fuck is the point of going out with your guns and standing in front of a business if you're just going to give up? Why are you bringing guns to something like that? Because you're not doing anything. You're getting yourself put in jail, and you're fueling all the people who think that any resistance is nonsense.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I kind of think the way that you do, if you're gonna bring them out, be prepared to use them, and know, let's just do it. Let's do it. Cap it off. That woman in Dallas, that certainly seemed like reason enough. But here we are with yet another stand down. Every time they show up saying that they're going to do something and then don't and stand down, it's disheartening, because it reinforces to the police that they still are an authority, that they are going to tell us what we're going to do.
Exactly.
And I think it's time to stop that.
Yeah. And that's what I can't really put my finger on, is whether people are jumping the gun because they don't have the resolve yet, if they're not ready to, take extreme action, and if that will ever be a feeling that's commonly held naturally, or if we're going to be pushed into that. And I think I lean more towards that, because I feel like the idea behind any sort of resistance or Boogaloo is that the state brings it to you, and all you wanted was to be left alone. So I think it's jumping the gun, kind of going out there with guns and standing there like you're going to do something and not doing anything. People build it up in their heads, and it just doesn't pan out the way they thought it would when a fucking MRAP shows up and whatnot. I think it's going to be brought to us, and it's going to be through discomfort.
Things get serious real quick. Yeah. Some things certainly warrant decisive and violent immediate action. We don't always have time to respond to those in a timely manner, unfortunately. Gosh, I honestly think the only language that the government understands is force. It understands violence, and I think that it probably is going to take that. So you have to ask yourself every day, am I that person? Am I capable of that? And think about those scenarios, and think about your limits in your head. What's going to push you over the edge. And if you're really analyze yourself and know yourself, then you'll know when that time is. But letting someone else push you into it because of something silly like showing up to a state capitol and getting pushed off the stairs, that doesn't really do anything. That's just more lip service.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an interesting position we're in, because we're kind of on borrowed time right now, as everybody's feeling each other out from state to resistance and whatnot. And like we were discussing earlier, the community efforts to support each other, to build new markets, new support networks and whatnot, are absolutely what we should be doing now, in conjunction with also, like you said, thinking about what your limits are, what actions you can take when the time comes, and being practiced and mentally sound enough, mentally prepared enough to do those things. This is a time that shouldn't be wasted before shit pops off, if it ever does. Yeah, I think that's really important, and it's important not to get caught up in one or the other. And I think, the people that we see in our circles are doing a pretty good job of that. I think a lot of people are. I'm sure more people are outside of our circles as well. But I agree that the state only understands violence, and that's probably what it's going to take. But I think the education and the starving of the state is only going to help us. So as we're building these networks and whatnot, and taking away their tax revenue, if possible, slipping under that, avoiding it, and anything else to, hamstring them a little bit. The death of 1,000 cuts until that final stroke is what we need to be doing. Action, focusing on that. And it's not just big violent actions that need to happen yet.
No, it's the everyday actions. It's any way that you can weaken them. I see so many people doing so many little seditious and subversive things, and those things all add up, from the hackers that like to do the DDoS attacks online. That's great, that eats up their time and their energy and their resources, and that's less time and energy and resources that they have to come after us and nitpick us to death. Mm-hmm. For the height of our vehicle, or the darkness of our window tint, or what have you. There's so many things. And now is a really unique time where they're kind of gathering their shit, trying to get organized so that they can continue on their path. But it presents really unique opportunities to us on the agorist road to provide better services, and to teach people how to weaken them in their weakened state right now, how to weaken the government, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah,
is people, there are certain people that have information, or they can teach other people. Hold on just a minute.
Sure.
Sorry.
No problem.
Oh, sorry. Anyway, they've got skills to share. They've got things that they can teach others as far as how to continue weakening that government machine.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I know it's not good to talk about your preps, because that's a good way for people to know what you have and come and take it. So you don't have to talk about your specific preps and whatnot, but what do you see around you, or maybe what you're doing in general that might be a good guide for other people to do? Because from our discussions in group chats and whatnot, I think you guys are definitely doing fucking awesome.
Everybody in every different area is going to have different things that they can do, different ways that they can get themselves and their family ready for whatever might be coming. Here in Colorado, we're kind of remote, so we've got our gardens going. We're focusing on like building a greenhouse, and getting together with some of the community for like armed training. I'd like to get some chickens and some goats. I don't have them yet, but that's definitely on my short list. Food and security is what it's all about. I think it's what it's always all about. But right now, food and security is threatened in different ways. Mm-hmm. So it's time to start thinking about how to bolster those things.
I agree. And we're on pretty much exactly the same page, because, like we said, we're in similar rural areas, and food and security is something that we can do with a little bit of extra space, being out away from the city and whatnot. And I struggle thinking of what to tell people who are living in cities, let alone apartments, what they can do other than defense. You can always stockpile enough defense in the corner of your room to at least get you out of there. But as far as food security, I don't know, because in some places you can have chickens or maybe a goat in the backyard, a small garden and whatnot, but people don't realize it takes a pretty big garden to feed not only yourself, but if you have a family, for just a year. It takes a lot of space and a lot of different plants and production.
It really does. Man, I can't imagine trying to be in a city. I always wanted to be out of the city. I spent most of my life living in cities. I've only actually been out west here for about five or 6 years. Um, I can't imagine being in a city, in an apartment somewhere, and trying to figure out what to do next or how to provide security and food to my family. I'd be real scared right now. I know that we have people who do live in the cities who are doing a real good job of, being prepared, and I would have to defer to their expertise because I just can't imagine trying to negotiate this situation right now
Right. Well, I
in
think,
an urban center.
yeah, I think back to before I moved up to Washington when I was living in Arizona. I lived in town most of the time, except when I was living by the border. I was out in the country again. But the only plan I had at that point, I was able to have a few chickens and a small garden and whatnot. But if shit hit the fan, I think your best bet is to get the hell out of the city centers. Have a bug out location you can go to, maybe a friend to double up with or something like that, because you're reducing your exposure to hostiles because you're surrounded by them potentially in the city. And I don't think it's feasible
Absolutely.
to try to, raise enough food to stay there and the resources it would take to defend it. You'd have to get a pretty big group together. And I think we're all finding how difficult that is no matter what our situation. And I just can't imagine that being a feasible plan in the city.
Yeah, I really can't either. Access to clean water is a
Mm.
big issue in the city, more so all the time because we've got all this failing infrastructure right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my plan would probably be to get out as well. It certainly was when I lived in the city. Where was I going to go? I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
I had no skills once I got there. I didn't know how to hunt when I lived in the city. I didn't know where burgers came from.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a big learning curve to subsistence living or primitive living, trying to survive in the forests or in the mountains. Now's definitely not the time to be at the beginning of trying to learn those skills.
No, it's not. It's definitely is not the best time to be, but for fuck's sake, if anybody's listening who has not started practicing, don't be intimidated by that. Fucking jump into it. That's a discussion I have with my wife all the time. It's never too late to start doing something one bite at a time. It's what you got to do. And yeah, everybody's got to do that.
Yeah. It really tickles me how people really changed their stance on gun ownership once shit started looking hinky. All of a sudden, everybody was out there buying the stuff. Now, I hope that they're actually buying ammunition and, a tourniquet and learning how to use their tools. But it shows that they really don't have a whole lot of faith in the government either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially not for protection. They know what the fuck is up. And yeah, that was super annoying because near the beginning of this, there was a special, I think at Sportsman's, just for a decent semi-auto 22 that I was interested in going and getting. And holy fucking shit, the lines. There's an hour plus in line trying to get this thing, only to be told that it was sold out already. But the thing that stuck with me was the people who had no idea what they wanted, trying to ask these poor two guys working the Sportsman's counter about all the different pistols and wanting to see all of them. And it's just like, Jesus, what are you doing?
Yeah. See, those are the people that need friends. They need friends who've been doing this for a while because, it just doesn't just come to you. You don't just become John Wick because you decide that you're ready.
Fucking A. Yeah, and even applying that to reality, to Keanu Reeves' training before that movie, he got legit, and he's put in more training than even most gun people, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, he looks pretty slick doing it too.
Yep. And if anybody's looking for resources like that, I'm sure they're out there everywhere. But last week I had Christopher Ledbetter on, and he posts some great videos, whether it's actual military footage, actual combat footage, or stuff where he's training with his buddies. So it definitely does help to find somebody with that experience, but you can find the resources online, so don't be intimidated by it and jump into it.
Yeah, for sure. And now is the time to do it, because ammo is not getting easier to find. Guns are not getting easier to find. I think you're right. Anywhere you can learn, you do. You just suck up that information right now.
Yep.
And practice.
Yep. I think getting a group together face to face is invaluable. I've talked about that ad nauseum on here, and I'm glad that you guys are having success with that. And I'm glad that I had, once again, Chris on the show, Chris Ledbetter, just because of how he kind of gets that together. Simple questions on to judge how the people that you're bringing in value freedom, and it's either a yes or no from there. And then you can work together and have each other's back. But it's a nerve-wracking thing trying to choose people to join you in that sort of situation that could potentially lead to trouble. So definitely got to be careful with that. It's nice to know them beforehand, but sometimes you got to do it. You got to join up with people you don't know.
Yeah. This is, there are a lot of dangers in that way right now. There are infiltrators. There are people who would sell you out because they don't agree with what you're doing. Yes or no is really kind of where we're at. Are you willing to stand up for freedom and do the things? Do you know your limits?
Yep. Yeah, definitely got to vet people and stay careful. So, I mean, it feels like every episode lately I've been talking about Boogaloo and fucking COVID and stuff, and I know it's understandable since it's the world that we're fucking in, but it's hard to think about anything else. What's been good and happy in life lately for you?
Oh, good and happy. Let's see. Well, I'm really enjoying the communities that are coming together, the sense of community that I am finding over all of these new stressors in our life. I think that there are a lot of things that are going really well. There are a lot of things to be happy about. I see people coming to big spiritual awakenings, people that are getting together and making sure that their community has what it needs. There are lots of reasons to be happy and heartened right now. Personally, I've got my first from seed to plant pot grow going on right now, and I'm very excited about that. I'm loving and nurturing my little babies every day. Yeah, there's lots of good shit going on in the world right now if you just get out and look at it.
Yeah.
We get caught up talking in all the bullshit. One of the things that I see that I'm really excited about is people putting aside their labels and coming together to establish, big anarchist communities, instead of getting lost in those ANCOM, ANCAP things. It's all about what can we create together? What are we going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And I see them doing it, and I love that.
Yeah. It's called a purity spiral for a reason. People get sucked into it and never get out of there. And it's just so useless, it seems. Like, yeah, philosophy and theory are important, but if you're endlessly debating those, you're not really doing anything else. Why do that when you could take action, small action, whatever? Put it to practical use.
Yeah, and really, honestly, that whole philosophy and debating, it's great. But aside from recruitment, what's it really doing? Because we're not going to overthrow all the governments of all the world and establish Ancapistan. That's not going to become like the new global philosophy. It's not going to happen. The best thing that we can do is weaken them to the point where we have the freedom to live in the communities and practice the philosophies and principles that we want. And if you don't like them, move on. Go find one you do. It's all about how do we work together and how do we get strong together so that we're ready to take advantage of the fact that we can create those communities. There are communities going up in Arizona, Nevada. There are floating communities, big community in Mexico. If you don't like what you've got, go somewhere where they're doing what you like.
Mm-hmm. And that's probably the important thing. Some of the glue that holds that together too is creating a space in which we can create those communities that hold different ideals and philosophies and whatnot. Because as long as we have this overarching control and false authority, it's going to be hard to not only create those communities but to keep them. Arguing over which community we should start doesn't matter if we can't start it.
That's right. And if we can't perpetuate it, I don't particularly care what flavor of anarchy somebody wants to practice, as long as they're willing to work with each other and build something better.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. There's so much infighting. People get so stuck on those labels, and it's just a big disappointment because they miss out on so much. They miss out on really rewarding, enriching relationships because they don't want anything to do with each other, and it's silly. It's silly enmity.
Mm-hmm. It is, and there are good people helping to mitigate that. We know that. We see them, and I appreciate that. I'm glad for that, and we're just about at the end of the episode time, and I think that's a positive note to lead off on. Unity, not more division. Any last thoughts before we call our show?
Nah, man, I'm so excited about anarchy. I'm on fire with it. We're doing it.
Hell yeah. All right, y'all. Thanks for listening. And remember, total freedom, no exceptions. Enemy of the State's Dank Pod-Stash is sponsored by Project Sparta. Go to projectspartacoaching.com to learn more.